Ever get that feeling like you're just stuck in a rut, you know?
Right.
Like you're just yearning for something more,
Yeah.
some kind of adventure.
Oh, yeah, I know that feeling.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Today, we're going to be talking about a woman who basically said, forget this, I'm out of here. Jeanne Baret decided to disguise herself as a man and sneak onto a ship
Wow.
to travel around the world
That's wild.
in the 1700s.
Yep.
This is Jeanne Baret. She's the first woman to circumnavigate the globe.
It's incredible. And you know what strikes me about Baret's story is that it's not like she was some rich thrill seeker. She was born into poverty in rural France in the early 1700s, and yet, she achieved something truly incredible.
Yeah, it really is incredible. So let's map out her journey. We've got ship logs, we've got historical records, we even have some accounts from Bougainville himself, that's the leader of the expedition.
Right.
He was a pretty important guy in French exploration.
Yeah, definitely a big name.
So where do we even begin with this story?
Well, Baret's early life is a bit of a mystery, but historians think she trained as an herb woman. So she had this really valuable knowledge about plants and how to use them for medicine.
I see. So maybe that's kind of what led her to Philibert Commerson. He's that renowned botanist I mentioned earlier.
Right, exactly. He was really a pioneer in the field.
And they actually became more than just colleagues, right?
Yeah, their relationship was it went beyond just the professional. They were romantically involved. They even had a child together, although sadly the child didn't survive.
That's so sad.
And this is where things take a really interesting turn. In 1766, Commerson got this opportunity to join a huge expedition. But at the time, women were completely forbidden on French naval ships.
Oh, wow.
So Baret was faced with this, impossible choice, separation from Commerson
Or what? I mean, what could she even do?
She took a risk, a big one. She decided to disguise herself as a man. She took the name Jean Bonifay and signed on as Commerson's assistant. Can you imagine?
It's hard to even wrap your head around that, like the constant discomfort of binding her chest, the fear of being discovered every second of every day. And you have to remember, this is the 18th century. They didn't have, modern ships with all the comfort.
Right, exactly. This was a journey full of danger for anyone, let alone someone hiding their true identity. Imagine rough seas, violent storms, outbreaks of disease.
Yeah, just constant hardship. I can't even imagine what she went through. So how was she discovered? I mean, it had to happen at some point, right?
Well, there are actually a few different stories about how her secret came out, and the timeline's a bit unclear.
Okay, so tell me those different stories.
So Bougainville. In his version of events, he claimed it happened in Tahiti. He said the Tahitian people recognized her as a woman.
Oh, interesting.
But, you really have to read those old accounts carefully. They're often full of the biases of the time. And looking back, that Tahitian story probably reflects more of a misunderstanding of their culture than anything else.
It's so important to be aware of those biases when you're looking at historical records.
Exactly. And then there are the ship surgeon's logs. Some other accounts place the discovery much later in New Ireland. Those entries are pretty disturbing, actually. They hint at possible harassment or even assault by some of the crew.
Oh, wow, that's awful.
And then you have to wonder about Commerson's role in all of this. I mean, he knew the risks. Did he really put his own ambitions ahead of Baret's safety? What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's tough. It's a complicated question for sure. Historians still debate his true motivations. Some say he was afraid of the consequences, like what would happen if they found out. He could have been worried about his reputation.
So he was more concerned with saving his own skin than hers.
Maybe. But then you read some of his writings, he praises her courage,
Hmm.
her dedication. It sounds like he really cared about her.
So it's not so clear-cut. I guess we'll never know for sure what was going on in his head. Right. And don't forget, Commerson was really sick during the whole expedition. He really needed Baret's help. It's possible that he saw her disguise as, the only way to keep her close. Both professionally and personally, I mean.
So it was almost like a necessary evil in a way.
Yeah, you could see it that way.
But let's move on from their relationship for a minute. Let's talk about her work, her actual contributions to botany. What was she doing on the expedition? Like, what kind of plants were they collecting? And why was it so important?
Okay, so picture this. You're on this tiny ship in the middle of this vast ocean. You finally reach land. And it's just teeming with plant life you've never seen before.
That must have been incredible.
It was. And Baret, along with Commerson, documented thousands of plant species. Many of them were completely new to European science.
Wow. Can you imagine discovering
yeah.
all these new plants for the first time?
It must have been mind-blowing. And get this, Her handwritten labels on those plant specimens, they still exist today.
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
It's a real testament to her meticulous work.
So wait, she wasn't just collecting random plants, right?
Oh, no, not at all. They were very carefully chosen. Some had potential medicinal value, others were important for economic reasons, and others, well, they just helped us understand biodiversity better.
So she was a key part of the scientific mission.
Absolutely. And her work made a real difference. Some of the plants she collected led to new medicines. Others changed how we think about plants and where they grow. Take the bougainvillea, for example.
Bougainvillea, like flower.
Yep. That flower was named after, you guessed it, Bougainville himself. But it was Baret and Commerson who brought it back to Europe.
So this beautiful flower that we see everywhere has this hidden connection to Jeanne Baret.
It really does. And I think it shows just how much women contributed to science, especially back then. They often didn't get the credit they deserved.
And their work is still impacting us today. So the expedition eventually ended, but Baret's story didn't. What happened to her after they got back to France?
Well, they didn't actually go straight back to France. The expedition hit some snags, and they ended up stranded on Mauritius. It's an island in the Indian Ocean.
Uh-oh.
And sadly, Commerson's health just kept getting worse. He died there in 1773.
So she was a widow, alone on a random island, thousands of miles from home. What did she do?
She didn't give up. She kept working, organizing Commerson's plant collection, all those notes and specimens. She even managed to ship a bunch of it back to France.
Wow. She was determined to preserve his legacy.
Yeah, and you could say her own legacy, too. I mean, a lot of that work was hers. And eventually, she did make it back to France, the first woman to ever circumnavigate the globe.
That's incredible. So wait, she technically broke the law by disguising herself. What happened?
Amazingly, the French Ministry of Marine actually recognized her work. They gave her a pension.
That's incredible. They basically said you broke the rules,
Yeah.
but you did a good job.
Pretty much. And to top it off, in 2012, a new plant species, Solanum bariciae, was named in her honor.
I love that. It's so fitting. Tell me about this plant.
Well, it's known for its resilience. It can adapt to all sorts of harsh environments, just like Baret herself.
I like that. So here we are, centuries later, talking about this incredible woman. Why should we care? I mean, what makes her story relevant to us today?
Good question. I think Baret's story makes us think about all those women in history whose contributions were overlooked, especially in science.
Right, like their voices were just silenced.
Exactly. Baret's story is inspiring. It reminds us that even when society tries to hold us back, we can still achieve amazing things.
I mean, can you imagine? To live a lie like that for years, just to follow your passion. What do you think kept her going?
Yeah, it really makes you think. Maybe it was the love of discovery, the excitement of seeing new places, meeting new people. I don't know. Maybe she felt a sense of freedom out there on the open sea, away from all those expectations back in France.
She must have been so strong. I mean, just imagine keeping up that disguise while dealing with seasickness, storms, the constant fear of being found out.
Absolutely. It's easy to forget about all those unsung heroes, people who did amazing things but never got the recognition they deserved.
And that's what's so great about looking back at history. We can rediscover these incredible stories and learn from them and be inspired by them.
Right. It's like we're bringing their stories back to life.
Exactly. And what I find so fascinating about Baret's story is that it still resonates with people today, centuries later. What do you think that is? What is it about her journey that speaks to us?
That's a good question. I think maybe it's that universal desire to explore, to push beyond our comfort zones. We all crave adventure, knowledge, something more than the everyday routine.
And for Baret, it was even more challenging because of the times she lived in. Women weren't supposed to do the things she did.
Exactly. It really makes you think about the limits we put on ourselves and the potential we all have if we can break free from those limits.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Jeanne Baret's incredible life, I keep coming back to this one question. What if we all lived with a bit more of her spirit? I mean, what if we faced the unknown with that same courage, that same drive to learn and discover, and that same determination to break free from expectations?
Wow, that's a powerful thought. Maybe her real legacy isn't just about the plants she discovered. Maybe it's about inspiring us to live a life full of purpose and passion, to push ourselves beyond what we think is possible.
And maybe, just maybe, her story will spark something in someone listening today. Maybe it'll inspire them to explore, to learn, to make their own mark on the world. Because at the end of the day, that's what Jeanne Baret's life was all about, leaving a legacy that lasts. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring and keep pushing the boundaries of what you think is possible.